Imagine a colossal castle made of rock and iron, hovering in the sky with no end in sight. That's this world. Just this enormous fortress floating in midair. A team of super dedicated experts spent an entire month studying it, and what they found was mind-blowing. The base of the castle is over 6 miles wide. That's big enough to fit an entire neighborhood from Tokyo inside. And if you thought that was crazy, just wait. This castle has 100 floors stacked on top of each other. It's so huge that it's hard to even imagine. Inside this gigantic castle you'll find bustling cities, tiny towns and villages, forests teeming with life, open plains and sparkling lakes. It's like a whole world inside a single incredible building. The amount of information and secrets hidden within its walls is almost too much to handle. This castle is truly one of a kind, an epic wonder that will leave you amazed and curious about what other surprises it might hold. Imagine being stuck in a massive castle with thousands of other people, and the only way to move between floors is by navigating through treacherous mazes filled with scary monsters. To get to the next floor, you have to find the staircase that connects them, which is no easy task. But here's the cool part. Once someone brave enough makes it to the next floor and reaches a major city, a special teleport gate opens up in all the cities below. This gate lets everyone travel instantly between floors. It's like having a magic door. It took 2 whole years, but slowly and surely, the people trapped in the castle started to conquer it, floor by floor. Right now they've made it to the 74th floor. The castle's name is Aincrad, and it's a pretty intense place, a floating world of battles and adventure with about 6,000 humans stuck inside. It's like a giant video game, but it's real life. Here's the rewritten text. You might know it as Sword Art Online. I felt a sting as the enemy's sword nicked my shoulder. It was just a game, but my heart still skipped a beat. A cold feeling crept into my chest as I saw my health bar, that blue line at the edge of my screen, get a little smaller. I still had plenty of life left, with over 80% of my health intact. But it was a reminder that I was 20% closer to disaster. Before the enemy could strike again, I quickly jumped back to create some space between us. Huff, I let out a breath and took another one. It was weird. My virtual character didn't need oxygen, but I knew my real body, lying on my bed at home, was probably gasping for air. My hands were sweating, and my heart was racing like crazy. This was insane. Everything around me looked super real, like I could reach out and touch it. But the weird thing was, I wasn't really in danger of getting hurt. I mean, if I lost, I wouldn't die, or anything. I'd just lose some points. But even though it wasn't real, this battle still felt totally unfair. The creature in front of me was like something out of a nightmare. It had the body of a man, but its skin was covered in slimy green scales. Its head looked like a lizard's, and it had a long tail that it could swing around to knock me off balance. The craziest part, this monster wasn't even alive. It was just a bunch of computer code, which meant it could come back to life as many times as it wanted. But here's the thing, the more I fought it, the smarter it got. The computer program that controlled the lizard man was watching me, learning my moves, and getting better at fighting me every second. This was not going to be easy. Here's the rewritten text. As soon as this lizard creature died, all the information about it would be erased. It wouldn't pass on to the next lizard man that showed up. That meant this lizard man was special, a one-of-a-kind individual. I muttered to myself. Right, the lizard man didn't understand what I said, but it still laughed at me with a hiss. Its sharp teeth glinted in the light. This creature, called the Lizard Man Lord, was a level 82 monster. Everything in this world felt real, not fake or made up. I gripped my long sword tightly, and held it straight out in front of me, just below my chest. The lizard man got ready to fight too. It raised its shield on its left arm and pulled back its curved scimitar with its right. We froze for a moment, waiting for the other to make a move. Suddenly, a cool breeze swept down the dark corridor, making the torches on the wall flicker. The flame lights danced across the wet stones, casting spooky shadows everywhere. Suddenly, a fierce roar echoed through the air. Graz! The Lizardman Lord sprang into action, its curved sword slicing through the air in a blazing orange arc. It was aiming straight for my belly. This was no ordinary attack. It was called Fell Crescent, a powerful move that could cover 4 yards in just a fraction of a second. But I wasn't worried. In fact, I was waiting for this to happen. My plan was to stay out of reach and see if the lizardman would fall for my trap. The sword zoomed past my face, so close that I could smell the charred air it left behind. My nose scrunched up at the stinky odor, but I didn't flinch. I dodged low and pressed myself against the lizardman's belly. "Saya," I shouted as I swung my weapon sideways. The cyan glowing blade sliced through the soft scales on its underside, and instead of blood, red beams of light shot out everywhere.
A loud crack
Echoed from above, but I didn't stop fighting. My sword skills took over, helping me attack faster than I could on my own. This is what makes sword skills so powerful in this world. They give you a huge advantage in battle. My sword flashed back and forth, striking the lizardman's chest again and again. It was like my sword had a mind of its own, moving quickly from left to right, finding its mark every time. I kept my momentum going and spun my whole body around, striking the lizardman with an even stronger blow. "Readability," it roared in anger and fear, as it swung its curved sword down at me. But I wasn't done yet. My combo was still on fire. I quickly moved my sword from right to left, striking upwards in a swift diagonal motion. This time I hit the lizardman's heart, its weakest spot. This powerful four-part move created a square of glowing blue lines around me. It was called horizontal square. A super cool sword skill. The bright light bounced off the walls of the maze, and then disappeared. Here's what happened next. The lizardman's health bar just disappeared. As it let out one last ear-piercing scream, its huge green body flipped backward and froze at a weird angle. Then, bam, it exploded into a bunch of tiny triangles, like a giant glass window shattering into a million pieces. That's what death looks like in this virtual world, past and total. Suddenly a purple message popped up in front of me, showing me all the experience points and cool items I'd just earned. I swung my sword back and forth a few times, feeling pretty proud of myself before putting it away on my back. I took a step back, leaned against the dungeon wall, and slid down to sit on the ground. As I let out a deep breath and closed my eyes, I could feel a headache starting to throb in my temples. It had been a really long and tough fight. I shook my head a few times to try and clear the pain, then opened my eyes again. When I looked down at the clock in the corner of my screen, I was surprised to see that it was already after 3 p.m. Time was running out. If I didn't escape this crazy maze soon, I'd be stuck outside when night fell. I should head back, I said to myself, standing up slowly. It had been a long day of trying to stay alive. I had made it through another day without, dying. But as soon as I rested and woke up the next morning, the battles would start all over again. And let's be real, when you're fighting non-stop and one wrong move can be fatal. Anything can go wrong. No matter how careful you are, luck can turn against you at any moment. My big worry was that the game would be too tough to beat before something bad happened. If I just wanted to survive, the smart thing to do would be to stay safe in town, and wait for someone else to figure out how to win the game first. I have to admit, I was totally obsessed with this virtual reality game. I spent every spare moment playing, even when it meant putting my character's life on the line. Was I a total gaming addict? Or just crazy enough to think I could save the world with my sword skills? As I left the labyrinth, I couldn't help but grin at how far I'd come. It all started 2 years ago, when everything changed. I remembered the struggle like it was yesterday. Nenj, Ayurchum, Playa. I heard someone shouting in frustration, swinging their sword wildly at thin air. Suddenly a huge blue boar charged forward, dodging the player's attacks with ease. It was a crazy sight, this massive creature avoiding every slash and strike, despite its size. I burst out laughing as I watched Klein fly through the air and roll across the field. The beast's flat snout had sent him soaring. Not like that, Klein, I said with a grin. The key is your first move. Klein jumped up, rubbing his sore spots. Oh, stupid pig, he yelled. He glared at me and said, easy for you to say, Kurito. This boar is super fast. I had just met Klein a few hours ago. He had bright red hair that stuck out from under his headband, and he wore simple leather armor. If we had used our real names when we introduced ourselves, we would have had to be super polite and formal with each other. But for now we were just Kurito and Klein, trying to take down this crazy boar. Here's the rewritten text. In this virtual world, we had chosen our own cool character names. I was Kurito, and my friend was Klein. It would have sounded weird if we called each other Klein-san, or Kurito-san. Here, I looked over at Klein and saw that he was a bit shaky on his feet. That spill must have made him dizzy. So I quickly picked up a rock from the grass near my feet, and held it above my shoulder. The game recognized what I was doing, and thought I was getting ready to use a sword skill. Suddenly, the rock started glowing with a faint green light. The next part happened super fast. My left hand moved quickly, and I swung the rock in a bright arc through the air. It hit the blue boar right between its eyes, just as it was about to charge at us again. The pig let out an angry squeal and turned towards me. "Hey, it's not gonna just stand there like a dummy," I said. "As long as you start the move right, and use your sword skills correctly, the game will help make sure you hit it." Klein started mumbling to himself. Motion. He waved his cutlass around in his right hand, trying to get it right. The wild boar we were fighting was pretty weak, but Klein had already missed a bunch of times, and gotten hurt by its counterattacks. His health bar was almost halfway gone. If he died, it wasn't the end of the world, he'd just come back to life in the nearby town. But that would mean we'd have to walk all the way back here to the hunting grounds again, which would be a total pain. This fight was almost over, just one more round to go. I dodged the boar's charge with my sword, but then I hesitated. I turned to Klein and said, "It's not just about swinging your sword and cutting the enemy, you have to feel it." I tried to explain. You start to swing, pause for a split second, and then bam, you strike with all your might. Klein looked at me with a curious expression. Bam, huh? He was holding his curved sword in front of him, but his usual handsome face was scrunched up in a funny grimace under his bandana. He took a deep breath, lowered his body a bit, and then lifted his sword like he was going to rest it on his shoulder. It looked like he was trying to get into position to try out my advice. Here's the rewritten text. This time everything came together. Klein's curved sword gleamed orange as he shouted "Rah!" He took a smooth step forward with his left foot and swung his blade in a perfect motion. The result was a cool shanjin sound effect that made it seem like his sword was cutting through the air on fire. His reaver move, a special one-handed scimitar skill, hit the charging boar right on the head, taking out its last bit of health. The massive boar shattered into 1,000 pieces with a sad squeal, and we saw purple numbers floating in front of us, showing how much experience Klein had gained. "Hell yeah!" Klein yelled, striking a triumphant pose with a huge grin on his face. He held up his hand for a high five, and I happily obliged, cracking a smile of my own. "Congrats on your first kill," I said, still grinning. I couldn't help but laugh at my friend's excitement. "That boar was super weak," I said with a grin. Klein looked at me in surprise. "You've got to be kidding. I thought it was a tough boss." I shook my head. "No way, it was a total pushover." I put my sword away and smiled at Klein. Deep down, I knew why he was so thrilled. This was the first time he'd gotten to defeat an enemy all by himself. Usually, I took care of the fighting because I had more experience and better skills, but this time, Klein got to be the hero. Klein was so pumped that he kept practicing his moves, whooping and hollering with joy. Meanwhile, I looked around at our surroundings. The sun was starting to set, casting a golden glow over everything. The field was beautiful, with the sunlight taking on a reddish tint. It was a great moment, and I was happy to see Klein so happy. Imagine standing in a huge field, surrounded by amazing sights. To the north you'd see the dark shape of a forest. Look south, and the lake sparkles like 1,000,000 diamonds. If you glance east, you can barely see the walls of a town. But if you turn west, all you'll see is sky and fluffy golden clouds. We were in the town of beginnings, which is like the starting line for the game Aincrad. It's on the first floor, at the very bottom of this massive virtual world. There were probably lots of other players nearby, battling monsters, and having their own adventures, but the field was so big that we couldn't see anyone else. Klein put away his cool cutlass, and walked up to me. We both looked out at the horizon, taking in the breathtaking view. "Wow, I still can't believe all this is just a game," he said, shaking his head. I laughed. Just because we're playing inside the game doesn't mean it's controlling our minds, or anything. "I'm telling you, our brains are getting the info straight from the nerve gear," I said, crossing my arms like a kid who's not getting their way. My friend was super excited about playing Sword Art Online, a virtual reality game that lets you live in a whole different world. "This is amazing," they exclaimed. "I've never felt so alive." I rolled my eyes, but secretly I was pretty stoked too. The nerve gear is what makes this game possible. It's like nothing we've ever seen before. Unlike old gaming consoles that just use a TV and controller. The Nerve Gear is a special headset that covers your whole head. It has tiny transmitters inside that send signals straight to your brain. That's right, it doesn't even need to go through your eyes and ears. The Nerve Gear talks directly to the parts of your brain that control what you see and hear. It's like a superpower for your gaming sessions. I had to admit it was pretty cool, but my friend was acting like it was the most amazing thing ever. It's not that big of a deal, I said with a laugh, but deep down I knew it was kind of a big deal. This technology was changing the way we play games forever. Imagine being able to experience a whole new world with all of your senses: sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell. The Nerve Gear makes it possible. This cool device can trick your brain into thinking you're really there. To start, you put on the headgear and lock it in place with a special chin strap. Then you just say "Link start" and suddenly all the noise around you disappears and everything goes dark. But don't worry, that's when the magic happens. A colorful rainbow ring appears out of nowhere. And as you pass through it, you enter a completely digital world. This amazing machine was released to the public in May 2022, and it's a total game changer. The company that made it calls this experience a full dive into virtual reality. It's like being in your own private world, where nothing from the real world can bother you. The Nerve Gear doesn't just make you see and hear things, it also lets you control everything with your mind. It's like your brain is talking directly to the virtual world. This means you can do anything you want in this digital world, and it feels totally real. Imagine you're playing a virtual reality game and your mind tells your body to run, but if your body actually listened, you'd crash into the wall of your room. Luckily, a special device called Nerve Gear helps prevent that from happening. It intercepts the signals from your brain to your body and turns them into digital information. This means you can run around and swing swords in the virtual world without hurting yourself. Klein and I were having an amazing time playing this game, called SAO. We were completely immersed in the virtual battlefield. Once you experience a full dive like this, it's hard to go back to older gaming systems that use touch pens and movement sensors. It's just not as exciting. I turned to Klein and saw that his eyes were watering. He was staring at the beautiful fields and city walls in the game. I asked him, "Is SAO your first game using Nerve Gear?" He nodded, looking proud like a brave samurai from ancient times. When he's serious, he looks like he could star in a movie about old Japan, but trust me, that's not what he looks like in real life. Imagine a character created from thin air, using a bunch of cool settings to make it just right. I made mine look like a hero from an awesome fantasy anime. It was almost too perfect. My friend Klein spoke up in a bold voice, which might not have been totally real. "I got my hands on the game Sword Art Online super early," he said. "I had to buy special gear just to play it. Only 10,000 copies were available at first, so I feel really lucky. But you're even luckier, you've been playing since the test version came out, which makes you way more fortunate than me." Can you believe it? Only about 1,000 people got to test out Sword Art Online. I said, scratching my head as my friend stared at me like he was trying to read my mind. I still get excited thinking about how crazy everyone was. When the game was first announced, the Nerve Gear was this amazing new device that let you totally immerse yourself in a virtual world. But when it first came out, there weren't many cool games to play on it. At first we just got simple puzzle games and educational stuff, which was a total bummer for gamers like me. The Nerve Gear is supposed to make you feel like you're really inside the game. But it's not as cool as it sounds when the virtual world is super small. I mean, imagine being able to walk only 100 yards in any direction before hitting a wall that you can't get past. It's like being stuck in a tiny box. Imagine being inside your favorite video game. That's what happened when virtual reality gaming came out. At first it was amazing, but soon gamers like me wanted more. We were looking for a specific type of game called an MMORPG. Say that 3 times fast. This kind of game lets thousands of players hang out in the same huge world, going on adventures and battling monsters together. Then the news came, Sword Art Online was launching. It was the first game of its kind where you could play with others in a virtual world using special VR gear. The game took place in a gigantic floating castle with 100 levels to explore. Each level had its own forests, fields, and towns, and players had to search for a staircase to climb to the next level. But watch out, scary monsters guarded each floor. What made Sword Art Online different from other fantasy games was that it didn't have magic spells. Instead, players could use special moves called sword skills to fight. These skills weren't just for battling. You could also use them to craft cool stuff like swords, armor, and clothes. You could even use your skills to catch fish, cook food, or play music on a virtual instrument. The idea was to make the game feel as real as possible, so players had to move their bodies and use their wits to succeed. It was going to be an epic adventure. Imagine being able to live a whole new life in a virtual world. That's what players could do in this amazing game. They could go on adventures, but they could also buy a house, farm the land, and even raise animals like sheep. It was like having total control over their own virtual lifestyle. As more and more details about the game came out, people got super excited. The game's creators announced a special beta test, where 1,000 lucky players would get to try out the game before it was released to the public. This would help the developers make sure the game didn't crash or have any bugs. But here's the crazy part. Over 100,000 people applied for the beta test. That's almost half of all the special gaming devices, called Nerve Gear, that had been sold up to that point. The developers were totally overwhelmed by the response. It just showed how much people were looking forward to playing this game. I still can't believe my luck. I managed to snag one of the super rare spots as a beta tester for this awesome new game. It was like winning the lottery. As a beta tester, I got to play the game before anyone else, and even got first dibs on the retail version when it came out. Those 2 months of testing were crazy. I couldn't stop thinking about the game even in school. I'd imagine my character's skills and gear, and as soon as I got home, I'd dive back into the game until morning. Before I knew it, the beta test was over, and when they erased my character data, it felt like I was losing a part of myself. The big day finally arrived Sunday, November 6, 2022. Sword Art Online was launching at 1:00 p.m. And I was so ready. I logged in a whole 30 minutes early, eager to get started. I checked the server status, and wow, over 9,500 other excited players were waiting just like me. It was going to be an epic adventure. Imagine a new video game that's so hot, it sells out in seconds online and people line up for days to buy it in stores. That's what happened with the game SAO. It seemed like only the most hardcore gamers were able to get their hands on a copy. As I started playing, I met a guy named Klein in the virtual town of beginnings. I was trying to find a cheap place to buy some weapons, and he noticed that I knew exactly where I was going. He figured out that I must have played the game before during its testing phase. "Hey, can you give me some tips?" he asked. I tried to pretend like I was just a friendly town guide, but Klein wasn't fooled. Before I knew it, we had teamed up and were fighting monsters together outside of town. It was pretty crazy. To be honest, I'm not exactly the most social person, either in the game or in real life, but somehow Klein and I had clicked, and now we were adventuring together. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of our wild journey in SAO. I met a lot of other gamers during the beta test, but none of them really became friends. That was until I met Klein. There was something about him that made me feel comfortable. He had a way of getting past my guard, and making me want to hang out with him. I was surprised by how much I enjoyed talking to him. "So what's next?" I asked. "Want to keep practicing until you get the hang of it?" Klein's eyes sparkled with excitement. "You bet," he said. But then his eyes darted to the side, checking the time in the corner of his screen. "But I need to log out for a bit and grab some dinner," he added. It was weird how much I didn't want our conversation to end.